Who's Ellen? That's what the lead investor asked. Mid-pitch, mid-slide, mid-smile on Greg's face. The room fell quiet. And Greg? He froze. Just for a second. But in VC meetings, a second is forever. He was halfway through presenting my deck to a room full of capital when the question hit. Slide 4. Up right corner. A neat little gray tag, N. Every slide had it. Greg coughed, flicked his eyes toward the screen, then smiled too wide. Oh, that. Just internal versioning. Nothing important. He clicked to the next slide fast, hoping to bury it. But the moment hung there. Heavy. Charged. Because the question wasn't about letters. It was about authorship. And the answer was standing quietly at the edge of the room, holding the clicker. Me. It was the first time I'd ever seen Greg, our VP of strategy, the man who could charm a boardroom blindfolded, lose his footing. His voice didn't crack. Not yet. But his face. That gave him away. That trademark confidence. The slick delivery, the casual arrogance. It all evaporated the moment he saw those 2 letters. N. Repeated. Stamped quietly onto every key slide. His jaw tightened. He glanced down at the deck like maybe the letters had just appeared. Like they were some glitch, not my initials. Not the mark of the person who actually built the pitch he was standing on. Then he looked at me. And I knew exactly what was running through his head. Say something. Bail me out. Smile and explain it away. Do what you always do. Make me look good. But this time, I didn't. I just met his eyes. And smiled. 3 months earlier this pitch didn't exist. Not in a deck. Not in a strategy doc. Not in any meeting room. It lived in the corner of my notebook, next to a coffee stain and a half-eaten to-do list. Just a half-formed idea about solving a logistics gap no one else in the company had even noticed. I'd spent weeks chasing case studies, scraping reports, building mock-up frameworks at midnight with no audience but my apartment walls. No one asked me to. There was no directive. No project owner. Just a hunch. And the kind of obsession that wakes you up at 3 a.m. thinking, wait, what if we inverted the flow entirely? It was messy. Not investor-ready. But it was mine. I shaped it alone, slide by slide, stat by stat. Every data point had a source. Every number had a backup. Every angle came from hours of reading and rewriting. I didn't put Len on the slides to make a statement. I did it because I've been erased before. 'Cause I learned a long time ago. If you build something from scratch, you better leave your initials in the foundation. I showed it to Greg one afternoon, half expecting him to cut me off by slide 2. Instead, he let me finish. I walked him through the new market segment, the automation layers, the margin impact if we integrated it into our existing product suite. When I was done, I waited, hopeful just for a second. He closed the laptop and leaned back with that signature smirk. Feels niche, he said. I don't think VCs are looking for this kind of model right now. They want scale. Simplicity. That was Greg speak for. This isn't worth my time. He moved on. Started talking about a separate presentation due next week. As if I hadn't just dropped 3 months of work onto his desk. He nodded. Said, got it. Took the laptop. Walked out of his office. But I didn't drop the idea. I went home, opened a new tab and started again. Because I didn't need his approval. I just needed the right audience. I didn't have a title. Didn't have buy-in. Didn't even have permission. But I kept building. Night after night, I refined that deck like it was going to war. Polishing the model, redesigning the visuals, stress testing the numbers until they stopped wobbling. And on every slide, bottom right corner, 2 letters. N. M. Subtle. Just 5-point gray font. Tucked into the margin where no one would notice unless they looked. I wasn't branding it. I wasn't trying to prove anything. It was for version control, mostly. But part of me, some old quiet part, just wanted to mark that this was mine. Not to be loud. Not to challenge. Just to remember. 'Cause I knew how this place worked. I'd seen ideas lifted before. Seen strategy notes turn into someone else's slide deck. Seen managers walk into meetings with words they didn't write. So I left the initials. Not as a warning. Not even as protection. Just as a seed. A soft signature for the day someone might ask, "Who built this?" It was a Thursday. I had just wrapped a late-night round of edits, refined the go-to-market timeline, adjusted the TAM slide, swapped out one of the competitor benchmarks. It was the cleanest version yet. I sent it to Greg at 11:42 p.m. Subject line: latest draft. Let me know what you think. I didn't expect a reply right away. Didn't even expect feedback. Just wanted it on his radar, for when he was ready to pay attention. He never replied. But 2 days later I walked past the conference room and saw him presenting something to the leadership team. The deck looked familiar. Too familiar. The fonts. The color blocks. The slide flow. My slide flow. He had just removed the cover page. Swapped out the intro slide for one with his name. But everything else. Exactly. Built. No edits. No enhancements. No collaboration. Just repackaged. When I asked what the meeting was about, he said, "Oh, just walking through a few early-stage ideas. Nothing final." Then he smiled. And that was the moment I knew. He wasn't ignoring the idea. He was stealing it. The official pitch went out the following week. Not internally. Not as a test run. But to a VC firm with a $40 million early growth fund. I found out by accident. Someone from the product team forwarded me a meeting reminder they thought was for both of us. The invite read, "Investor pitch. Deck review with Greg. Time 10 a.m. Location: Executive conference room. Presenter: Greg Mallory." No mention of me. No CC. No FYI. Nothing. I scrolled down and saw the attachment. Opened it. And there it was, my deck. Word for word. Slide for slide. Except this time the title said, "Concept Lead Greg Mallory." I didn't cry. I didn't slam my laptop. I didn't storm into his office. Because I knew exactly what this was. He wasn't forgetting me. He was removing me. On purpose. And he thought the initials, those tiny Ellen tags on every slide, were too small to matter. He was wrong. Because they weren't decoration. They were breadcrumbs. And someone was about to follow them. I knocked on his office door that afternoon. Controlled. I had rehearsed every word like a performance. Because that's what it had to be. "Hey," I said, stepping inside. "Saw the pitch went out. Mind if I join for the VC follow-up next week?" Greg didn't even look up at first. Just scrolled through his emails, then gave me that smile. The one that made junior staffers feel heard and invisible at the same time. "Honestly, Lauren. Let's not overcomplicate the optics." He leaned back in his chair. "You're brilliant. But VCs expect executive presence. Senior leadership. Someone who can speak their language. Someone who looks like him," he meant. I kept my expression neutral. "I built that pitch, Greg." His smile didn't falter. "Of course you did. And I've made that clear internally. This is just positioning." Positioning. I nodded slowly. "Got it. Not because I accepted it. But because I wanted him to think I had. Because Greg wasn't just taking credit. He was counting on my silence to keep it. The day of the pitch, I wasn't at the table. I was near the screen. Behind the laptop. Running the tech. Greg introduced me as Lauren from Strategy. Here to help keep things moving. Not Lauren Nash, the person who built the entire investment thesis. Not Len, the initials stamped on every slide. Just support. Smiled. Said nothing. Clicked share screen. The VCs joined right on time. 4 of them sharp-eyed and quiet, except for one who immediately asked for a copy of the deck to follow along. Greg obliged. And then he began. Bullish. Confident. Delivering my opening lines like he wrote them on a napkin during a jog. Slide by slide, he recited the structure like a script. Only I knew where it stumbled. Where he missed nuance. Where he added buzzwords in places that didn't need them. But I kept clicking. Because Greg was too convinced of his own brilliance to see what was coming. He thought the pitch was going fine. He didn't notice the subtle looks between the investors. Didn't clock the one in the middle, Dan from Artemis Capital, tilting his head at the lower right corner of every slide. Then, halfway through the market fit slide, Dan leaned forward and asked, Sorry, before we go on, who's in? Dan asked it casually, like he was just curious. But the way the room shifted, that was anything but casual. Greg froze. Just for a beat. But it was the kind of beat that destroys credibility in rooms like this. He looked at the screen, then at Dan, then, of course, at me. I didn't blink. Didn't move. Didn't help. I just waited. He let out a half laugh. One of those throat-clearing chuckles people use when they're drowning in their own words. Ellen. He clicked to the next slide, same initials in the corner. Then another. And another. It was like a ghost haunting the presentation. Every slide branded with the truth. Oh, he said finally, voice tightening. That's just a template artifact. Probably initials from our junior designer. Junior designer. That's what I was now. In front of $40 million in capital. Dan raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. Just leaned back. Greg tried to push forward. Rushing his lines now, skipping details. Nervous sweat rising under the collar of his perfectly tailored jacket. But the pitch. It was already over. Because in a room full of people trained to spot risk, they just seen the biggest one. A man who couldn't even answer for his own slides. Greg tried to recover. Anyway, as I was saying, he moved to the financial slide. But his voice had changed. It wasn't confident anymore. It was clipped. Mechanical. The kind of tone that says, don't look too hard, just keep nodding. But they were looking. And he knew it. He glanced at me again, longer this time. A silent plea in his eyes. Say something. Explain. Fix this. But I didn't. Because that's what he had trained me to do. Make him look good. Back him up. Clean his mess. But not today. Today I just kept my hands on the laptop. Clicked when he nodded. Smiled when he stumbled. And watched the unease spread across his face like spilled ink. His stutter returned when he reached the product roadmap. He skipped over the pricing slide altogether. By the time he reached the final ask, his voice barely filled the room. And the investors, stone silent, until Dan closed his notebook and said, Thanks, Greg. Could we maybe get a follow-up directly with Lauren? Greg blinked. That fake executive grin tried to stretch back across his face, but it collapsed halfway. Sure, he said. Trained. Absolutely. But it wasn't absolute. It was over. Because the one thing worse than being exposed in front of a client is being exposed in front of someone who can write a $10 million check. It came in at 7:41 p.m. Subject line. Follow-up from today's pitch. From Dan, the lead investor. Me. Not Greg. Me. Hi, Lauren. Appreciated the deck today. Thought the structure and flow were strong, especially the market fit and distribution slides. Would love to hear more about your thinking behind it. Are you available for a follow-up call sometime next week? Just you, we'd like to go deeper with the person who built the narrative. Let me know what works. No corporate jargon. No fake formality. Just quiet acknowledgement. They saw it. They saw me. I didn't reply right away. I read it twice. Then 3 times. Not because I didn't believe it, but because it was the first time someone outside the building recognized the fingerprints I'd left on every slide. It wasn't just a meeting invite. It was validation. On the record. On purpose. With receipts. Greg didn't BCC me. Didn't loop me in. Didn't protect me. But my work did. And now. The investor wasn't following up with the title. He was following the initials. N. Greg called me into his office the next morning. Shut the door. Didn't even sit down. He was pacing. His shirt was wrinkled, hair uncombed, like he hadn't slept or hadn't stopped sweating since Dan's question. Got your email from Artemis. he said, pretending it was casual. Like he hadn't spent the entire night refreshing his inbox, waiting for a message that never came. He nodded. They liked the deck. He forced a smile. Managerial. Yeah, look about that. Obviously I told them you were involved. It's just, you know how optics work. There it was again. Optics. The corporate umbrella for every kind of theft. I wasn't involved, Greg, I said. I built it. He stopped pacing. Okay, but that's not the story we're telling now. And if they start asking questions, real questions, you're not doing the firm any favors by stepping outside the chain of command. I raised an eyebrow. You mean telling the truth? He hesitated. Lauren, don't make this messy. We can course correct. We bring you in on the follow-up, let you answer a few technicals. Clean handoff. Everyone wins. Everyone didn't win. He just didn't want to be the one who lost. He wanted me to save him again. To carry him on the back of the work he'd already claimed as his own. But this time, I wasn't cleaning up after him. I was walking ahead of him. That night I drafted my reply to Dan. No drama. No exposé. Just the truth. Measured, clean, undeniable. Aiden. Thank you for the kind words. Yes, I'd be happy to walk you through the strategy in more detail. Attached is the original draft of the pitch deck, with my notes, version history, and references used to build the financial projections. Happy to schedule a time that works best for your team. Lauren Nash. And just like that, Ellen became a full name. No longer tucked in the margins. No longer invisible. 10 minutes later he responded. Perfect. I'll loop in the partners. Looking forward to hearing your vision directly. Not Greg's. Worse. I didn't forward the email. Didn't tell Greg. Didn't call a meeting. Because I didn't need to explain myself anymore. My work had already done it. And now, it wasn't about salvaging a pitch or protecting a reputation. It was about stepping into the space he tried to fill with my silence. And replacing it with my voice. 1 week later, I walked into the Artemis Capital conference room. This time not to run the laptop. Not to sit in the back. Not to click for someone else. I sat at the table. The head. A fresh deck was cued on the screen. Title slide clean, bold, unmistakable. Market Disruption Strategy. Presented by Lauren Nash. Not strategy team. Not support. Lauren Nash. Dan smiled as he took his seat. We're excited to hear it from the source this time. I walked them through the full narrative. Clarity, poise, metrics sharp, pacing tighter than ever. Every question they asked. I answered without a glance at notes. Because I didn't memorize this deck. Built it. And when I reached the final slide, there were no awkward silences. No stutters. No sideways glances asking someone to explain what they didn't understand. Just quiet nods. Followed by Dan closing his notebook and saying, "Let's talk terms." As I walked out, my phone buzzed. Message from Greg. "Nice job today. Glad it worked out." I stared at it. Didn't reply. Because I didn't need to. The initials he tried to bury. They now sat on the signature line of the biggest opportunity we'd ever landed. Not in the corner of a slide. But front and center. Right where they always belonged. Lauren Nash.